Welcome to PCA Spinal Chat, the official podcast of the Pennsylvania Chiropractic Association. In this deep dive episode, we're exploring one of the most debated topics in modern healthcare: neck pain, chiropractic care, and the question of risk. A new study published in the National Library of Medicine, led by a team that includes neurosurgeons, takes a hard look at the science behind cervical artery dissection, or CAD, and its reported connection to chiropractic treatment. Every year, millions turn to chiropractors for safe, effective relief. This new research helps separate fact from fear and clarifies what the evidence truly shows. At PCA, our mission is to support chiropractors, protect patients, and advance evidence-based care. Now let's hand it over to our hosts for today's deep dive.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that, well, it's almost like medical folklore for many people, especially if you've ever dealt with neck pain.
Oh, absolutely. Neck pain is incredibly common.
Yeah, and if you've had that chronic tension, a stiff neck, those headaches, you really want relief. We're talking huge numbers here. Something like over 10 million doctor visits just for neck issues back in the early 2000s.
And a significant chunk of people, maybe 12% of North Americans every year, they turn to chiropractors for neck manipulation to deal with that pain.
Right. It's a very common treatment.
Yeah.
But that common care sometimes gets linked, in people's minds anyway, to something really rare, but frankly terrifying.
You mean spontaneous cervical artery dissection, or CAD?
Exactly. CAD. And it is incredibly rare. The numbers are tiny, like 1 to 3 cases per 100,000 people per year?
That's the estimate, yes.
Yeah.
Very uncommon.
And this is the crucial part. Even though it's rare, it's a big deal when it happens.
A very big deal, because CAD is actually responsible for a pretty significant percentage, maybe 10 to 25% of ischemic strokes, especially in younger and middle-aged adults.
So if that common belief is true, if neck adjustments actually cause these dissections, then that risk, even if it's small, becomes something we desperately want to prevent.
And it's not just clinical. This belief has led to, well, a lot of lawsuits against chiropractors, high-profile ones.
The stakes are definitely high, clinically and legally. So our mission today is to do a deep dive into a specific study. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis titled Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis of Chiropractic Care and Cervical Artery Dissection. No evidence for causation.
We're basically asking, does the science actually back up this widely held idea that manipulation causes CAD?
Okay, let's start with the study itself. How rigorous was this review? Did they do their homework?
Oh, absolutely. The authors were quite meticulous. They did a systematic search, combed through Medline, Cochrane, the big databases.
Standard procedure for a good review.
Right. And they had independent reviewers grade the quality of the evidence they found using the American Academy of Neurology's classification system, the AAN system.
Okay.
And then, crucially, they evaluated the entire body of evidence they gathered using grade criteria.
Grade, that's a pretty tough standard for evidence quality, isn't it?
Extremely tough. It really forces you to look critically at the limitations of the data.
So after all that searching and filtering, what did they actually end up working with? How many studies made the cut?
Well, they started with 253 articles, but after applying their quality criteria, they were left with a pretty small group. Only 6 studies were good enough for the final analysis.
6 studies? That doesn't sound like a lot.
It isn't. And there were 2 Class 2 studies and 4 Class 3 studies. Importantly, there were 0 Class I studies.
Meaning no randomized controlled trials, the gold standard.
Exactly. Which tells you right away how difficult it is to study these rare events properly. You can't really randomize people to a potential risk like this.
Okay, so they take these 6 studies, combine the data in a meta-analysis. What was the headline finding? Did they find a link?
They did find a statistical association. When they pooled the data, the odds ratio, the OR, came out to 1.74.
Okay, 1.74. Can you break that down? What does that mean in plain English?
Sure. An OR of 1.74 basically means, looking just at the raw numbers, that patients who had this type of stroke, CAD, were about 74% more likely to have seen a chiropractor recently compared to people who didn't have a stroke.
74%. I mean, that sounds pretty significant. That seems to support the idea of a link.
It sounds significant, yes, but this is where the grade assessment becomes absolutely critical. Remember that.
Right, the overall quality check.
Exactly. Despite that 1.74 number, when the authors applied the grade criteria to all the evidence from those 6 studies combined, the overall quality was judged to be very low.
Very low. What does that translate to, practically speaking, if the evidence quality is very low?
It means our confidence in that 1.74 estimate is extremely weak, like really weak. The true effect, the real relationship, could be substantially different. It might be higher, or, and this is key here, it might be zero. There might be no real link at all.
So the number itself, that 1.74, is almost misleading because the foundation it's built on is so shaky.
Precisely. You just can't draw a strong conclusion from it alone because the underlying studies have too many potential problems.
Okay, so if the association number is unreliable, what's the likely reason for seeing that association pop up in the first place? The review points towards confounding, right?
Exactly. Confounding is the big elephant in the room here. We're looking at a correlation, two things happening around the same time, not necessarily causation, where one thing causes the other.
And the most likely confounder, the thing messing up the picture, is the symptom that often brings people to the chiropractor before the stroke is even diagnosed.
Yes, the neck pain or headache. This is probably the most critical piece of the puzzle. Statistics show that about 80%, 80, of patients who are eventually diagnosed with CAD report having neck pain or headache as a major symptom before the diagnosis.
Wow, 80%. So that really flips the script, doesn't it?
Completely. Think about it. If your artery is already starting to dissect, maybe just beginning that process, what's the first thing you feel?
Intense pain, presumably. Neck pain, headache.
Right. Severe, maybe unusual pain, so what do?
You seek help. You go to the doctor, maybe a chiropractor, if that's who you see for neck issues.
Exactly. You seek care for the pain that's already there, caused by the developing dissection. The visit to the chiropractor, or even a regular doctor, happens because of the symptoms, not the other way around.
So the treatment doesn't cause the dissection. The dissection or the pain from it causes the treatment visit.
That's the most plausible explanation for the association they found. The visit just happens to occur shortly before the stroke becomes obvious or fully develops, making it look like the visit was the trigger.
This brings us to a key study they included, right? The Cassidy study from 2008. That one tried to tackle this confounding issue head-on.
Yes, Cassidy et al. Did something quite clever. They recognized this problem that people seek care because they're already in pain.
So how did they try to account for that?
Instead of just comparing people who went to a chiropractor versus those who didn't, they compared the risk of stroke after visiting a chiropractor versus the risk after visiting a primary care physician, a PCP, your regular family doctor.
So comparing manipulation versus just a standard doctor's visit, basically. Both types of visits might happen if you suddenly have severe neck pain.
Precisely. They looked at visits within the 30 days before the stroke, and the results, especially for patients under 45, were really revealing.
What did they find?
They found that the risk of stroke was increased after both types of visits. Seeing a chiropractor recently had an odds ratio of 1.37.
Okay, a 37% increased association there.
But seeing a PCP recently, the odds ratio was almost identical, 1.34.
Wow. So basically the same level of association, whether you got neck manipulation or just went to your family doctor, likely complaining about the pain.
Exactly the same, statistically speaking. That finding strongly suggests that the visit itself wasn't the cause. If the manipulation were the culprit, you'd expect the risk associated with the chiropractor visit to be much, much higher than the risk associated with the PCP visit.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. So the most logical conclusion is that the visits to either practitioner were prompted by the symptoms of the dissection that was already underway. The visit didn't cause the stroke. The underlying condition caused the visit.
That Cassidy study seems pretty crucial for understanding why the overall evidence quality was rated so low. If that study helps explain the confounder, what other general weaknesses did the review find in the studies they looked at?
Well, there were several common problems, especially because these were mostly retrospective studies looking back after the event.
Like what?
Things like data collection bias. Many studies relied on asking patients later, maybe through mail surveys or interviews, whether they'd had chiropractic care before their stroke.
Recall bias. It's hard to remember details accurately, especially before a major health event like a stroke.
Exactly. And you also have survivor bias. The people who had the most severe strokes might not survive to be interviewed, skewing the results.
What about the studies using big databases? Don't those avoid recall bias?
They do, but they have their own issues. Two of the key studies used health administrative data, like insurance records. The problem there is reliance on diagnostic codes, like ICD-9 codes. Are those codes always accurate? Do they reliably tell you if a dissection was confirmed with proper imaging? Do they specify the type of manipulation used? Often they don't, so you risk misclassification bias, lumping different things together incorrectly.
And the review also mentioned potential bias from the doctors themselves.
Yes, interviewer bias or diagnostic workup bias. In the studies that weren't blinded, meaning that doctors knew about the patient's recent history, there's a possibility that if a patient mentions, "Oh, I just saw my chiropractor," the physician might be more inclined to order more tests, like advanced imaging, specifically looking for a dissection.
So they might look harder for CAD in that group simply because the idea of a link is already in their mind.
Right. And if you look harder, you're more likely to find it, which can create a false impression that the chiropractic visit led to the diagnosis, when really it just triggered a more thorough search.
Okay, so we have weak studies, recall bias, database issues, potential doctor bias, and this huge confounding factor of pre-existing pain. It's painting a picture of why that initial association is probably not causal.
Correct. The association is likely an artifact of these issues.
To really put the nail in the coffin of the causation idea, though, the review applied Hill's criteria, didn't it? The kind of checklist for establishing cause and effect in epidemiology.
Yes, Sir Austin Bradford Hill's criteria. It's the standard framework. The authors systematically checked the evidence against these 9 criteria.
And how did the supposed link between manipulation and CAD stack up?
It didn't stack up well at all. In fact, the association really only passed one of the 9 criteria convincingly.
Only one. Which one?
Consistency. Most of the studies included, 4 out of 5 that looked at it, did show some kind of statistical association, even if it was weak and likely confounded. So the finding was somewhat consistent across different studies.
Okay, so consistency gets a check mark. But what about the others?
Well, it failed several crucial ones. Let's take specificity.
Does the exposure manipulation lead specifically to the outcome, CAD stroke?
No. As the Cassidy study showed, visiting a PCP carried basically the same risk. The outcome wasn't specific to the chiropractic exposure, so it fails specificity.
What about temporality? The cause must come before the effect.
It fails that too, or at least the evidence is weak. Causation demands the exposure happens before the outcome starts. But as we discussed, in many cases, the symptoms of CAD, the neck pain, the headache, seem to start before the manipulation happens. The timing is often wrong for causality.
And then there are the biological criteria, coherence, and experimental evidence. Does the idea even make sense biologically?
This is a major failure for the causation argument. Coherence means the link should align with what we know about biology and mechanics.
And does it?
No. Biomechanical studies done on cadavers have actually measured the forces involved. They show that the typical forces used in spinal manipulation don't put enough strain on the vertebral artery to cause the kind of tear seen in the dissection.
So the physical mechanism isn't really plausible based on lab tests.
Correct. And similarly, the available experimental evidence, mainly from animal models, also doesn't support the idea that manipulation causes these injuries. So it fails on coherence and experimental evidence too.
So that's 4 failed criteria already. Specificity, temporality, coherence, experimental evidence. What about the rest?
The others like strength of association, which was weak, biological gradient, does more manipulation lead to more risk, no good data, plausibility, weak, given the biomechanics, and analogy, comparing to similar situations, were all judged as modest, unclear, or just lacking enough data.
So out of 9 criteria for establishing causation, it passes 1 weakly and fails several key ones. The verdict seems pretty clear.
The scientific verdict, based on this comprehensive review, is indeed clear. While there's a statistical blip, an association, it's based on very low-quality evidence and is almost certainly explained by confounding people seeking care for pain that's already started. There's no convincing evidence for a causal link.
Which brings us back to where we started. This belief persists, often strongly, and it has real-world consequences.
Absolutely. The review explicitly mentions the numerous episodes of litigation fueled by this misinterpreted correlation. That's a significant negative impact on healthcare providers based on, well, shaky science.
And the authors make a really pointed observation about this, calling the causal link something that often enjoys the status of medical dogma.
Yes, dogma. A belief held firmly despite evidence to the contrary, or at least despite a lack of strong supporting evidence.
That's a really important takeaway, not just for this specific issue, but for how we approach medical knowledge generally. It's a challenge to all of us, right?
Yeah.
Clinicians, patients, anyone involved in healthcare.
Definitely. We need to constantly question assumptions, even ones that seem widely accepted or feel intuitively right. Medical history is full of examples where correlation was mistaken for causation initially.
So perhaps the final thought for you, the listener, is about that critical evaluation.
Yeah, maybe the hardest part of science and medicine isn't always finding the new breakthrough. Sometimes it's having the courage to dismantle an old, comfortable idea when the evidence just isn't there.
a really powerful reminder from this deep dive. Thanks for breaking that down for us.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to PCA Spinal Chat, a service of the Pennsylvania Chiropractic Association. You can find a link to the featured study and related resources in the show notes. If there's a research topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, reach out through the contact link below. To stay engaged and strengthen chiropractic's future in Pennsylvania, join the PCA, support the PCA PAC, and help us keep evidence-based care at the forefront of healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode, follow, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned for more conversations where science meets practice. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep advancing chiropractic care in Pennsylvania.